All right, welcome everyone. My name is Coach David, and I am here with you today on March 5th at 5 o'clock to tell you everything that you need to know about loans. Okay. Now, again, loans are things that people are kind of familiar with, right? They are either, you've had a car loan, you've had a, home loan, you've had other types of loans, so on and so forth, right? So loans are something that are inevitable for some parts of life, right? Now, for education, other than your kind of home, it's probably the biggest investment that you'll be making in your lifetime, right? And so loans do sometimes become a part of it. And because of that, I want to make sure that you guys understand what types of loans there are, and also make sure that you guys understand which ones are, I guess, better and worse to get, so that you understand the situation that you're putting yourself and your student in. Okay. But before we kind of get to that point, I do want to kind of share a couple things with you, right? So as far as our agenda today, we're going to be talking about loans, right? Where can you get them, right? What are they, right? Also, how can they hurt you, right? So we'll kind of talk about that, right? We'll also talk a little bit about kind of some financial aid news that's coming up. I always start off with that, right? But as far as housekeeping, right? Again, one more time, if you can share your high school grade year in the chat, that'd be great, right? If you have any questions as we go through, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or in the chat. The Q&A does work a little bit better because I don't have to scroll up and maybe I miss a question. So if you can put them in the Q&A, that would be wonderful. As far as replays, right, they will be available within 24 to 48 hours. If you're in our Facebook group, they will be, we'll put a post there. You just respond to that post. And then we can go ahead and send you the replay. Okay. If you're in our coaching family, it'll be on our private YouTube channel, and then you will have access there. Okay. Now, a little bit about me, because I see a lot of new people here, right? So I am a former college and law school admission reader. I've also worked as a lawyer, right? And I've been helping families save money on college for the last, now it's over a decade and a half. It was really easy when it was last year because I just said decade and a half, but now I'm on my 16th year. Okay. And so I want to make sure that you guys know everything about the process so that you guys are not caught blindsided. Okay. All right. So with that, I do want to go into our financial aid breaking news. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world in general, right? In the United States. I just want to kind of highlight a couple of things that are happening just so that we can know what's going on, right? The first thing is that California has extended their state financial aid deadline to April 2nd, okay? There's two reasons, right? One of them was kind of the Southern California wildfires that happened and all the people that have been displaced by that, right? The other reason is because there's a whole bunch of seniors that have not filed yet, okay? So in more than in any other year, from all the articles that I have read, it has stated that there are less people applying for financial aid. Okay. And I think a lot of that has to do with people just automatically denying themselves, right? By not filling out the forms or just not doing anything about it, right? There's a lot of families that are in that 100, 200, 300, $400,000 range that can get money from colleges, but they think, oh, well, we make a little too much, right? And that's, that's great that you think, oh, well, we'll just pay back into the system. Okay. But there's also money there to be had. And if anyone's ever offered you a discount before, I'm not sure if you've said, oh, no, I don't want it. Okay. So just remember that, right? Another thing that's happening, right? I've shared this for the last couple of weeks because I want families to be aware, right? So on the right is kind of like the FAFSA form as it was about 3 weeks ago, right? 4 weeks ago, right? So as far as the kind of like students' gender, there was male, female, non-binary, prefer not to answer. Now there's only two options here. It's male and female. That's it. Obviously, now they ask about biological sex instead. Okay. So again, this affects a lot of students, right? Lots of parents, right? And so I did want to kind of bring it up to you. Okay. Now, another thing that has happened and is going to be something that I'm going to keep a close eye on is this, right? Now, normally one of the kind of factors that kind of influences your financial aid or the ability to get financial aid is that you do not have any felony convictions. Okay. Now, one of the things that has happened recently is that in Georgia, and again, if one state starts, it usually has a trickle effect to other states, right? But Georgia is now implementing, or they're kind of like looking at a bill that would ban students that were part of protests at school, right, on college campuses, right, from getting financial aid in Georgia. Okay. That means that any protest related convictions, so any kind of civil disobedience, things like that, right, which is a decades old practice in the United States, would be a factor in students not being able to get financial aid. Now, they did try to, after the bill was introduced and this and that, they did say like, oh, this is just for people that are, engaged in violence or unlawful behavior, damaging property, or violating others' rights to access certain buildings, right? Again, we don't know what the scope and the specificity of this bill is going to be, but it's a dangerous and slippery slope, right? If they say that this is something that kind of civil disobedience and protesting is something that can help, that can be a situation where you lose your financial aid, what else is out there? Okay, so something to keep your eye on. Again, stay tuned, right? There's a lot of moving parts right now. I'm going to try and provide as much information to you guys as possible, right? But let's get into the training, right? Again, my fair warning is always, if you've heard any of these things, we make a little too much money, right? My family is not eligible. I own my own home. I have a rental property, right? This and that, so on and so forth, right? Then you probably need to stay, right? Because these are the people and the families that always get the short end of the stick when it comes to financial aid. They don't get something, they don't get this, right? Again, one of the like there's multiple reasons why I started doing financial aid, but one of the other reasons is that, well, my parents, right? They were very blue collar, right? They were first generation immigrants to this country, right? They worked tough jobs, right? And they made, again, like a lot of families say, a little bit too much money. Okay. Now, because of that, they paid for college in full cash at the time, right? My college was the most expensive at the time when I was going to it, right? I believe that the cost was around $72,000 a year, right? And they basically wrote a check for $36,000 every semester, right? Now, luckily, I graduated a year early, so I saved them $72,000. But still, $72,000 in a long time ago money is a lot of money, right? And even now, it has gone up even more, right? It's $90,000 to go to a private school nowadays, right? If you're going to a state school, yes, you're paying less, but that is still $45,000 a year, okay? So if you're kind of thinking like, I'm here, I'm listening, but we're not going to qualify, you do need to listen, okay? All right. Now, before we get into our kind of training, one of the things I did want to do was make sure that we do introduce kind of our sponsor, and it is egelloC, right? We are formerly known as College Admission Secrets, right? And Financial Aid Secrets is part of egelloC, and that is formerly College Admission Secrets, okay? So one of the things that I did want to make sure that families know about is our college app intensive, okay? So there's multiple different parts to our college app intensive, but you can basically think that it is 3 days over kind of the April to September time span, right? You come for day one, right? And for that day one, it's about making sure that you're getting to your rough drafts. Your ideas are presented, and we are able to kind of work on those ideas to make sure that you're on the right track. The second day is about getting to final drafts, right? Or the second part of it, the 2-day event, right, is about getting you to your final drafts. So if you are interested, go ahead and go to collegeappintensives.com, right? I will also have a link later on. And for those that are here live today, I'm going to have a pretty special deal for you, right? So stick around until the end. Okay. So let's talk about loans, right? Now, the first thing that we have to think about is, where do you get them, right? Now, for the purposes of education, the most common place to get a loan is the federal government. Okay. Now, the U.S. Department of Education is the kind of department that takes care of federal loans, right? But with all the things that are changing, I'm not sure who is going to be in charge of that in the future. Okay. One of the ideas that has been floated is that the Department of the Treasury or the IRS, right, is going to take over loans, right? We're not sure what's going to happen, right? Now, that's the most common place to get loans, right? Some loans are also provided by your college, right? Some colleges have loan programs, right? And a lot of the ones that are given by colleges are really good because a lot of the times there's 0% loans until you graduate, right? So no interest, okay? And then there's private lenders, Sallie Mae, SoFi, College Avenue student loans. And even your local bank, right, that you bank at might have educational loan options. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now, from the federal government, there are different types of loans, right? Now, the first differentiation that we need to make is between student loans and parent loans, right? We'll be talking about student loans first. Okay. So that is where we're going to start right now. I'm not sure how many students there are here, right? But I know that there's a lot of parents. So this is something that you need to be able to kind of provide and give information about. So make sure that you're listening carefully and that you can relay this information later to your student. Okay. Now, for student loans, there are kind of two major types from the federal, right? There's private loans, right? But those are kind of separate. So the two types of loans are subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. Okay. So the first one that we're going to look at is a subsidized loan. Now you might be thinking, what is being subsidized, right? The word subsidized means that they're doing something or they're kind of like giving you a break on something, right? So for the subsidized loans, what is happening, right, is the government does not charge you interest on that loan while you are in school at least half time. Okay. Repayment begins 6 months after graduation or 6 months after you are out of school for more than half time. Okay. So I've actually gotten this question recently, so I will answer it. A family asked me, well, let's say my student does go to college and they don't finish, right? And they leave school to go get a job. They just kind of live their life that way, right? And what happens to that loan? Well, 6 months after you leave school and you're no longer registered in school, you will have to start repaying that loan, right? Now, as far as kind of the amounts that you can get, right? In freshman year, the maximum amount of a subsidized loan that you can get is $3,500. For sophomore year, it's $4,500. And for junior and senior year, it's $5,500. Now, I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to get this full amount, right? But if your student, and most students do qualify for student loans, then these are the amounts that you'll get. The total amount that is available to students in subsidized loans is $19,000. Okay, keep that number in mind, 19,000. Okay. Now, unsubsidized loans, right? These are loans where the government does charge you interest on your loan as soon as you receive it, right? But here's something that you really need to understand, right? And a lot of people think, well, it's a smaller amount, doesn't matter too much, right? But it really does if you look at it over the long term. Okay. So your first loan will have 4 years of interest on it, right? So the first loan you take out your freshman year, your second loan will have 3 years of interest as you are graduating, right? Your third year will have 2 years of interest as you are graduating, so on and so forth. So basically, if you think about it, even before you start being out in the workforce, you already have 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year of interest on a $2,000 amount, right? Now, the amount is only $2,000, right? So for people that are worried that it's a huge amount that the student will never be able to repay, it's not that situation, but it is something significant that you do have to think about. Okay. Now, again, repayment on this loan begins 6 months after graduation or 6 months after you're out of school, right? But a lot of people decide, well, if we need to take this loan, we'll pay the interest on it, right? Just so that we can just pay back the principal later, right? So the total amount available to students is $8,000. Okay. So I told you guys to remember a number from before, right? $19,000. That's how much the student can get in the maximum situation, right? In in what is that? Subsidized loans, right? For unsubsidized loans, right? 8,000. The total amount of student loans that a student can get over the course of 4 years, doesn't matter what kind of institution they're going to, public, private, out of state public, right? Wherever it is $27,000. That is it. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay. One of the things I do want to kind of bring up for parents is interest rates, right? Now, as everyone knows, the interest rates currently suck, right? And so the interest rate on your loans will suck. And let me tell you what they are. Okay. For the student loans, right? For both types, for the unsubsidized or the subsidized, right? The interest is 6.53%. Okay. Now you guys might be thinking, hey, that's not bad. And in today's market, it is not bad. right? The reason why the interest rate is more reasonable here is because the students, there's no kind of expectation that the students will be able to pay this back, right? So the interest is put at a lower amount to kind of release a little bit of that burden, right? In addition, there are loan fees, okay? So it's 1.059%, right? Now, if you do borrow the max each year, right? The subsidized, loans, they don't have interest, so that we're not talking about that. But if we just talk about the unsubsidized loans, right? For your freshman $2,000 loan, your interest will be $522 when you graduate, right? For your sophomore year, it'll be $391 in interest, right? Junior year, 260, right? And then senior year, 130. The total interest alone is $1,304, right? You get to borrow $7,915, right? And you repay $9,304, right? And you might be thinking, okay, well, wait, why am I only borrowing 7,915, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? Well, you have your loan origination fee, right? They take that out of the amount that they give you. So if you borrow 8,000, you're never getting 8,000 into your bank account or getting 8,000 taken off of your school bill. Instead, it's the kind of total amount that you take minus the origination fee, and then you're going to repay, right? If you repay it right at the end as you're graduating, you will repay $9,304, right? Now, that doesn't look like a lot when it's like, okay, well, yeah, I understand. We have to pay interest on a loan. Like it just happens, right? But, right, if you actually look at it, and let's say those numbers had an extra zero in it, right? That's $25,000 that you're paying extra, right? If they did have an extra zero on it, right? So it's something that I want families to understand as they're going through this process, okay? It's not just something that you can kind of sweep under the rug. Oh, we'll figure it out later, right? It's something that you have to plan for now. Okay. Now, here is the thing, right? If you are paying them off as you graduate, not a big deal, right? Because again, the amount is less, right? But let's say that like a lot of people, right? Even, even Obama, right? I think he actually paid off his last student loan while he was president, right? So it takes a long time, right? Especially if you finance your education this way, right? Now, if you think about it over the course of 4 years, you are paying about 17%, right, of the original kind of amount that you borrowed, right? Um, but let's say that you pay it off in 10 years, right? So if we just do a quick calculation, right? This is what's going to happen, right? So if you pay it off as you graduate, it's 17%, right? But if you actually kind of pay it off over the course of 10 years, so 6 years more after you graduate, the interest that you're going to be paying is $4,438 for you to borrow $7,915. So over the course of that time, you're paying about 50% over 10 years, right? It doesn't seem right, and it is not right. And loans and these types of loans to get an education, to me, they should be way lower in interest, right? Because it kind of seems that they're telling people not to go to school when there's just this huge amount that you need to pay off. Okay. Now, quick takeaways here. The student, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into, right? It's not just about having them, like about getting that money and having it available, right? But it's also about repaying it as well. So you need to make sure that you have a discussion with your family to make sure that you're making the right financial choice, right? I'm not saying don't go to college versus go to college, right? But maybe we decide, hey, we're going to pick up a part-time job, right? And we're going to pay, $2,000, $3,000 out of that, right? So that we can make sure that we're keeping our loans down because those are just going to accrue interest. Okay. So it's something that you should think about and talk about with your student. All right. Now let's get on to the more fun part, right? Parent loans, right? And the reason why I say fun part is because the parent loans are the worst, right? And as I am providing you information on these things, you'll start to be like, oh my God, like this is incredible. Like this is crazy. Why is this like this? Right. And so here it is, right? So before I get into like the interest and like, the repayments and all these different things, the one thing I did want to help parents understand is this, right? A parent loan, right? When you take a loan out for your student to go to school, right? As the parent, you are not co-signing, okay? You are not a guarantor, right? you are liable for this loan, right? If you default on this loan, whoever your loan servicer is, they're coming after you. They are not coming after your student, right? It's a loan made out to you under your social security number, right? So what does that mean? That also means that the student, and again, the $27,000 number I wanted you to remember is this: $27,000 over the course of 4 years. If we just average that out, that's about $6,500 each year. Okay. That is not enough money to pay for tuition at a CSU. That is not enough to pay tuition at a UC. That is also not enough to pay tuition at a private school or out of state public school, right? There's a lot of families that come into, consultations thinking, well, my student can just take out student loans, right? That is not the case. The maximum amount that the student can take out is $27,000 over 4 years. That's it, right? Now, parents, you're probably thinking, no, wait, I've had friends do that, or I did that myself when I was in college, right? Well, yes, that used to be true. A student, right, an 18, 19, 20-year-old could take out $100,000, right, $60,000 in loans, right, to pay for college, right? But that's what led us into our $2 trillion student debt crisis, right? And so the government has changed the limits that students can take. The burden has now been shifted to the parents, okay? So unfortunately, sorry, parents, right? If you are thinking about taking loans, they're under your name. They are yours. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys saw the headlines that I had before, but the subsidized loans, I'm like, oh, they're the best kind. Well, because they're 0% interest until you graduate, right? The unsubsidized loans, those are kind of like the worst kind, right? And finally, the Parent Plus loans, this is the worst kind, right? And let's talk about them just a little bit, okay? The interest rate for the parent loans is 9.08%, right? The origination fee, which I know that all loans do have origination fees, but it's 4.236%, right? So before you even get any money and are thinking about paying for college, you're already out money, right? You borrow what, $100, you're already out $4, right? So it's something that you need to think about. These loans, right? The loans that you can take as a Parent Plus, let's say that the student, right? Let's say that the student gets like $5,000 in loans, right? The total cost of a college, let's say we're going to UC, right? So it's around $45,000. The student gets $5,000. The rest of the cost of attendance is $40,000. The parent can take up to $40,000 in loans, right? That's at like a UC, for instance, but also at a private school. Let's take USC, for instance. USC is $95,000. The student has $5,000 in loans, right? They can take that. The other $90,000, yes, parents, you can take that out. The government will provide it for you because they are making 9.08% off of you every single year. Okay. So just know that it is available if needed. Okay. Now, right, again, let's go ahead and say that we're going to a UC. Student loans, 5,500, right? Parent loans. If you wait 4 years until the student graduates, right, and you have 36, right, $1,500 in loans, right, and the student has $5,500 in loans, this is what you are paying back, right, after those 4 years. If you take it out the first year, okay, obviously it'll decrease, like the amount that you'll repay will decrease each year after because there's less interest involved, right? But just generally on the student loan, you're gonna borrow 5,500, you're gonna pay back 6,473, right? On the parent loan, right? If you borrow $36,500, the interest, right, 9.08% on 4 years, and the origination fee, you borrowed $36,500, you are repaying $50,142, right? That's just the first loan. If we extrapolate out, that means that you're gonna, if you take it for all 4 years, right, that means you're gonna have to pay back around $225,000 after everything is said and done, right? Unless you're paying everything back at once, the interest keeps accruing every month, every year. Okay. So again, obviously, like I don't need to tell parents this, right? The quicker you can pay it back, the better, the less interest you're going to have to pay, right? But it's not a small amount of money. It's not like it's just something that you can be like, oh yeah, it's like, swiping my card at the gas station, right? But again, we want to make sure that families understand the situation they're going into. Okay. Now, private loans, right? there's a lot of private loans out there. Depending on kind of your credit situation, it can be variable anywhere between 4.07% and 16%, right? There are families that do not qualify for traditional options, right? There's also students that might not, qualify for, traditional options as well, right? If that's the situation, again, there will be a limit to what the student can take because unless they've had a long like a history of working or this or that, there's not a lot of places that are going to say, hey, yeah, we're going to give you, tens of thousands of dollars in order to go to college, right? But having said that, I've only seen a few cases where federal loans were not an option. Okay. So the federal, it's always there for you, right? The interest rate, it's not good, right? But it's also compared to 16%, it's not bad, right? So it's something that you have to look into to see what fits for your family, right? Now let's talk a little bit about repayment options, okay? The repayment options, right, for students is very flexible because, again, right, the older generations, right, that went to college, right, and maybe didn't pay back their loans, right, they're they've seen so many problems with it that they want to make it possible for students to repay, right? Unfortunately, for parent loans, the repayment options are very not flexible. Okay. Now, for the student loans, right, and for the parent loans, these are kind of the more common ways to repay. Okay. So there's a standard repayment where it's like a set amount every single month for 10 to 30 years, depending on how much it is. Right. There's also graduated repayment, which is kind of like you start out slow and then you kind of ramp up as your income increases. Right. And then there's an extended repayment. Right. It's set at 25 years. Right. And it's a fixed or graduated amount. This is kind of like the standard ways to pay back any loan. Right. But for the student, there's also something called an income-driven repayment plan, right? So the payments are capped at a percentage of your annual income, right? Repayment is anywhere between 20 and 25 years, right? Different kind of plans exist, but it's roughly around 15%. Now, let's say that your student is making $100,000 a year, right? A lot of parents will be like, you know what? Like, I'm always worried about my student taking loans because I don't want them to be struggling when they get out and this and that, right? Now, if you really think about it, $100,000 a year, right? And they look at your disposable income. It's not necessarily like your like total income, right? There's other factors that do go into it, right? But let's say it's $100,000, 15%, that's $15,000 a year. They're saying that you can pay back. If that's the case, then you're paying back about, a thousand something dollars a month, right? But you're also bringing in a certain amount, so you should be okay, right? Now, let's say that your student is, doing volunteer work in, I don't know, Haiti, right? They're not getting paid anything, right? What is 15% of zero? It's zero, right? So even if they don't have an income, they're doing something else, right? The payments still continue to happen, but the payments are zero, right? Now, all student loans are eligible for this type of protection, right? But like I said, right, parents, that is not necessarily the case, okay? So I want to make sure that our families here today are able to ask questions. So if you do have questions about kind of anything we talked about today or anything about kind of financial aid in general, please put them in the Q&A, right? You can also reach out on Facebook, on Discord if you're one of our coaching families, right? Or you can reach out by email, whatever it is, get in touch with us. You can send a text back to the text that you got today, right? But we'll make sure to help you guys out, okay? Now, I want to make sure that you guys can reach out to us and talk to us about your situations, right? Whether you're interested in our college coaching programs or in our financial aid edge program, right? Reach out, ask your questions. If our programs fit for you, we'll tell you about them. If they don't, we won't, right? Now, one of the things that I really want, I put so many different ways on here, right? You can go ahead and text money, right, to 949-298-6234, right? If you have questions about financial aid. You can also text us college, right? For info on our college application intensive and also on our coaching programs, right? Same thing, right? So, right? I don't know if these QR codes still work. Let me see if they work. I know that we changed a bunch of our links recently. So let me see if this link works, this QR code. It does. Okay. So you can also do the QR code, right? And I'm also going to put the link for our financial aid consultation in the chat, right? So you have no excuse like, oh, I wasn't able to get it and I wasn't able to do this and that, right? There is always going to be a way for you to reach out to us. We have a quick question here and says, so is taking a loan not a good option? No, it is not necessarily not a good option. You just have to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. If you understand everything and you're like, yes, this is the best option for my family, then yes, we move ahead. Okay. But one of the things I did want to do is have something special for our families that are here live. So for families that are watching our replay, right, in Facebook and kind of our families, sorry, you weren't here live, right? We're going to stop the recording here. So I hope you guys have a great night, okay?